You really thought a scholarship made you one of us?
Grant Holloway sneered, shoving Elijah Vance hard enough to jolt the books in his arms.
That money's charity, man. Don't start acting like you belong here.
Before Elijah could answer, Grant cracked an egg over his head. The classroom exploded with laughter as yolk dripped down Elijah's face. He quietly wiped it away, while Grant smirked at the crowd.
Look at you, cheap clothes, beat-up shoes, used books. You really think anybody here sees you as an equal?
Elijah said nothing.
What's wrong?
Grant asked, stepping closer.
Too scared to fight back?
Elijah pushed Grant's hand away and looked him straight in the eyes. Grant's smirk faded for a second, completely unaware that the quiet student standing in front of him had spent the last 11 years training to take down men twice his size. Before we go any further, comment where in the world you are watching from and make sure to subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you don't want to miss. The late morning sun cast long shadows across North River State University's main quad, as students hurried between classes, their voices mixing with the distant hum of lawn mowers and construction equipment. Welcome week energy buzzed through the air like electricity. Fresh-faced freshmen clutching campus maps, upperclassmen reconnecting after summer break, and fraternity brothers prowling the walkways like sharks smelling blood in the water. Elijah Vance moved through it all like a ghost. His worn sneakers made no sound on the concrete pathway as he navigated between clusters of laughing students. The second-hand textbooks tucked under his arm felt heavier than they should. Criminal Justice Fundamentals, Constitutional Law, Introduction to Criminology. Each one represented hours of overtime shifts at the warehouse, careful budgeting, and the promise he'd made to his mother's grave. He kept his eyes forward and his shoulders straight. At 23, he was older than most of the fresh-faced kids around him, and it showed in the way he carried himself. Deliberate, measured, like someone who'd learned that drawing attention meant inviting trouble. "Look at this loser!" a voice cut through the morning chatter. Grant Holloway lounged against the base of the university's bronze founder statue, his perfectly pressed polo shirt and designer sunglasses screaming money. The Omega Rho letters on his chest caught the sunlight as he pointed directly at Elijah with the casual cruelty of someone who'd never faced consequences. "Kid, looks like he bought his clothes at a thrift store," Grant continued, loud enough for nearby students to hear. "Probably did." Mason Reed lifted his phone, already recording. The red light blinked like a predator's eye as he adjusted his angle to capture maximum humiliation. "This is gonna be gold," he whispered to Trevor Pike, who was already moving. Trevor's grin stretched wide as he picked up a carton of eggs from their prank supplies. "Welcome week tradition, baby. Fresh meat gets the treatment." Students began gathering in a loose circle, some pulling out their own phones. The energy shifted from casual campus bustle to something hungrier, more primitive, the kind of mob mentality that turned ordinary people into spectators at a public execution. Elijah sensed the attention before he saw it, the prickling awareness of being watched, hunted, targeted. His grandfather's training kicked in automatically. Assess threats, identify escape routes, maintain composure. But he didn't change his pace or his direction. Running would only feed their hunger. Trevor's footsteps approached from behind, trying to stay quiet, but failing. Elijah's enhanced hearing, sharpened by years of martial arts practice, caught every detail. The slight scuff of expensive sneakers on concrete, the rustle of clothing, the barely contained excitement in Trevor's breathing. The egg cracked against the back of Elijah's head with a wet splat that echoed across the suddenly quiet quad. Cold yolk and shell fragments slid down his neck, seeping into his collar and dripping onto his textbooks. The raw smell hit his nostrils as more egg white ran down his face, past his glasses, onto his lips. Students erupted in laughter, pointing and recording as Trevor raised his arms in mock victory. "Welcome to North River," Trevor shouted, his voice carrying across the quad like a battle cry. "Fresh meat gets the treatment!" The crowd pressed closer, phones raised, voices overlapping in excited chatter. Grant stepped forward with the satisfied smile of a king watching gladiators fight for his amusement. "What's wrong? Scholarship, boy?" Grant's voice dripped with manufactured concern. "Cat got your tongue? Or maybe you're just too stupid to understand what just happened?" More laughter. Louder this time. Meaner. Elijah stood perfectly still. The egg continued dripping down his face, but his posture never changed. His breathing remained steady and controlled, exactly like Victor had taught him during countless hours in the dojo. When the world tries to break you, become unbreakable. When they expect rage, give them ice. Slowly, deliberately. Elijah removed his glasses and cleaned them with the edge of his shirt. The motion was so calm, so methodical, that the crowd's laughter began to fade. Something in his stillness was wrong, unsettling, like staring into the eye of a hurricane and realizing the real storm hadn't started yet. He placed his glasses back on his nose and turned to face Trevor and Grant directly. His voice, when it came, was quiet enough that students had to lean forward to hear it. "Are you finished?" The question hung in the air like a blade. No anger, no humiliation. Just 4 simple words that somehow managed to turn the entire quad cold, despite the warm September morning. Grant's smile faltered for just a moment, before returning full force. "Oh, we're just getting started, welfare case. You think you can walk around here like you belong? Like you're one of us?" He gestured broadly at the Gothic buildings, the manicured lawns, the other students in their expensive clothes. "This place has standards, class, something you wouldn't understand." Trevor, emboldened by Grant's words and the crowd's attention, stepped closer to Elijah. His chest puffed out like a rooster preparing for a fight. "Yeah, maybe we need to teach you some respect for your betters." The circle of students tightened. Phones continued recording. Someone in the back called out, "Fight! Fight!" and others picked up the chant. Mason adjusted his camera angle, making sure to capture Elijah's face as Trevor invaded his personal space. This was the money shot, the moment the scholarship kid would either cower or explode. Either way, it would make great content. But Elijah didn't cower, and he didn't explode. He simply waited. Trevor's face flushed red as the silence stretched on. Being ignored was worse than being feared. It made him look weak in front of everyone, especially Grant. His hands clenched into fists as his voice rose to a shout. "Hey, I'm talking to you, you piece of trash!" Trevor shoved Elijah hard in the chest with both hands, putting all his weight behind it. The impact should have sent Elijah stumbling backward, maybe even falling. Should have finally provoked the reaction everyone was waiting for. Instead, Elijah barely moved. His feet remained planted. His balance stayed perfect. Only his eyes changed, sharpening with a focus that made Trevor take an involuntary step backward. From somewhere in the crowd, a camera flash went off. Then another. Naomi Whitaker pushed through the circle of students, her professional camera raised and already recording. The lens focused directly on the confrontation unfolding before her. Trevor's face burned red as whispers rippled through the crowd. Being ignored was one thing. Being made to look weak in front of half the campus was something else entirely. "You think you're tough?" Trevor's voice cracked slightly, betraying his desperation. He shoved Elijah again, harder this time, using both hands and putting his full body weight behind it. "Do something! Fight back, you coward!" The second push barely moved Elijah. His feet stayed rooted to the ground like tree trunks. His breathing remained steady and controlled. The only change was in his posture, a subtle shift that made him look somehow more centered, more dangerous. Grant stepped closer, his expensive designer shoes crunching on the fallen leaves. "Come on, scholarship boy, show us what you got. Or are you too scared to mess up Daddy's hard work paying for—" "My father's dead." Elijah's voice cut through Grant's taunt like a knife. Still quiet, still calm, but now carrying an edge that made several students take unconscious steps backward. "And I worked every day for 3 years to pay for this myself." The admission hung in the air. Trevor seized on what he thought was vulnerability. Boo-hoo. Poor little orphan boy. He grabbed Elijah's shirt with both fists, yanking him forward. "Maybe you should have stayed in whatever ghetto you crawled out of instead of—" Trevor never finished the sentence. Elijah's hands moved with surgical precision. His left hand covered Trevor's right wrist, while his right hand gripped Trevor's left elbow. The motion looked almost gentle, like he was helping Trevor with something instead of defending himself. Then came the pivot. Elijah stepped to the side and turned, using Trevor's own momentum against him. The wrist lock was perfect, not painful enough to cause injury, but firm enough to control completely. Trevor's arm twisted naturally as his balance shifted. At the same time, Elijah's right foot swept behind Trevor's legs. Not a vicious kick, just a precisely timed movement that removed Trevor's foundation at exactly the right moment. Trevor dropped hard onto the grass with a surprised yelp. His designer polo shirt rode up, exposing his pale stomach. Egg yolk from Elijah's hair splattered onto the ground beside him. The crowd gasped. Phones tilted to capture better angles. Mason, seeing his friend down, rushed forward with a wild swing aimed at Elijah's head. His fist cut through empty air as Elijah simply pivoted away, as fluid as water flowing around a stone. Mason's momentum carried him forward into a folding welcome sign advertising campus tours. The metal frame clanged as he stumbled into it, catching himself awkwardly with both hands. His phone skittered across the pavement. "Jesus Christ," someone whispered. Trevor tried to scramble to his feet, but Elijah was already there. One knee on the grass beside him, one hand maintaining just enough pressure on Trevor's wrist to keep him still. Not violent, not angry, just absolutely in control. "Stay down," Elijah said quietly. "We're done here." Trevor struggled for maybe 3 seconds before realizing it was useless. Whatever hold Elijah had on him felt like being gripped by a machine. Precise, unbreakable, completely without malice. Grant stood frozen 10 feet away, his mouth slightly open. The smug confidence had drained from his face like water from a broken cup. This wasn't supposed to happen. The quiet freshman was supposed to cower or throw wild punches that would get him arrested. Not this. Elijah held Trevor for exactly 5 seconds, long enough to make his point. Then he released him completely and stood up, brushing grass off his knees. The quad had gone completely silent except for the sound of phones recording and a few nervous coughs. Even the maintenance workers had stopped to watch. Then the murmurs started. "Did you see that? Is that karate? He didn't even break a sweat. Trevor got dropped like a sack of potatoes." Naomi's camera had captured everything. The egg prank, Trevor's shoves, the smooth takedown that looked more like dancing than fighting. Elijah's careful restraint even when he could have seriously hurt both attackers. Campus security's walkie-talkies crackled in the distance, growing closer. Grant's survival instincts finally kicked in. His face transformed instantly, replacing shock with practiced innocence. When the security officers jogged into view, he was already pointing at Elijah with shaking hands. "Thank God you're here." Grant's voice carried perfectly across the quad. "This guy just attacked us for no reason. We were just trying to welcome him to campus, and he went crazy." Mason nodded frantically. still clutching his bruised ribs. "He's dangerous. Look what he did to Trevor." Trevor remained on the ground, playing up his fall for maximum effect. "I think he broke something," he groaned dramatically. The security officers looked between the three fraternity boys and Elijah, who stood calmly with egg still dripping from his dark hair onto his shoulders. Yellow streaks stained his plain gray t-shirt. "Sir, we need you to come with us," the older officer said to Elijah. Elijah nodded once. He picked up his scattered textbooks, stacking them carefully despite the whispers and pointing fingers surrounding him. His movements remained unhurried, dignified. Without looking back at Grant or the others, Elijah walked steadily toward the student center, his spine straight and his head high. Egg continued dripping from his hair onto the concrete path behind him. The crowd parted automatically as he passed through. Some students stared in admiration. Others looked nervous, uncertain what they had just witnessed. Behind him, phones were already uploading videos to social media. The footage would be online within minutes, spreading across the campus network faster than wildfire. The student center restroom felt like a sanctuary after the chaos on the quad. Elijah stood at the sink, cold water running over his hands as he tried to wash the sticky egg whites from his hair. Yellow streaks clung to the strands stubbornly, requiring multiple rinses to come clean. His reflection stared back from the mirror. Same calm eyes, same steady expression. But his hands trembled slightly as he worked soap through his hair. And that tremor bothered him more than the egg ever could. Power without control becomes another kind of bullying. His grandfather, Victor's words echoed in his mind like they had 1,000 times before during training. The old man had drilled that lesson into Elijah since he was 12 years old, learning his first defensive stance in the community center gym. "You don't fight to prove you're strong," Victor would say, adjusting Elijah's form with patient hands. "You fight to protect what matters. The moment you enjoy hurting someone, you become the thing you're fighting against." Elijah splashed more water on his face, washing away the last traces of yolk. He had controlled himself out there. He had used exactly enough force to stop the attack, and nothing more. Trevor would have some bruises tomorrow, but nothing serious, nothing permanent. So why did his hands still shake? Because deep down, for just 1 second when Trevor grabbed his shirt, Elijah had wanted to do more than just stop him. He had wanted to make Trevor hurt the way his words and laughter had hurt, the way being humiliated in front of hundreds of students had hurt. That was the dangerous part. Not the karate, not the training. The anger underneath that wanted revenge instead of justice. Elijah dried his face with paper towels and straightened his damp shirt. The yellow stains would probably never come out, but it was wearable. He gathered his textbooks and pushed open the restroom door. A young woman with curly brown hair and sharp, intelligent eyes stood waiting in the hallway. She held a professional camera and wore a press badge that read, "North River Campus News." Her expression was serious but kind. "Elijah Vance?" she asked. He nodded cautiously. "I'm Naomi Whitaker, campus photographer." She gestured toward the quad with her camera. "I recorded everything that happened out there, the whole thing." Elijah's shoulders tensed. "Great. More footage." "No, you don't understand." Naomi stepped closer, lowering her voice. "I got the real version. From the beginning. Trevor sneaking up behind you with the egg. Grant pointing you out like he was targeting prey. All of it." She pulled out her camera and showed him the display screen. The footage was crystal clear, showing Trevor approaching from behind while Grant watched, and Mason positioned himself to film. The egg crack was clearly visible, along with Grant's mocking comments and Trevor's aggressive shoves. "The fraternity's version is already spreading online," Naomi continued. "They're saying you attacked them unprovoked. that you're some kind of violent psycho who can't control his temper. But this proves they started it. This proves you were defending yourself. Elijah studied the footage. His own restraint was obvious even on the small screen. The careful way he controlled Trevor without seriously injuring him. The way he stepped back instead of pressing his advantage. "Why are you showing me this?" he asked. "Because the truth matters." Naomi's voice carried conviction. "And because I've been watching Omega Rho for months. This isn't the first time they've pulled something like this. They just usually pick targets who can't fight back." By afternoon, the entire campus was buzzing about the karate freshman. Students whispered in dining halls and lecture rooms. The video of Elijah's defense had gone viral on social media, racking up thousands of views and shares. Comment sections exploded with debates about self-defense, fraternity culture, and campus safety. The backlash against Omega Rho grew steadily throughout the day. Students who had previously ignored fraternity pranks suddenly spoke up about harassment they had witnessed or experienced. The campus Facebook page filled with stories about Omega Rho's Welcome Week traditions that crossed lines. By 4 o'clock, Grant Holloway found himself standing on the steps of Omega Rho House, surrounded by his fraternity brothers and several smiling university administrators. Dean Margaret Bellamy stood slightly behind him, her polished appearance and carefully neutral expression projecting institutional authority. Grant's apology was masterfully crafted. His voice carried just the right amount of remorse without admitting serious wrongdoing. He spoke about misunderstanding and learning experiences, while carefully avoiding words like assault or harassment. "We want to personally apologize to Elijah Vance for what happened today," Grant said, looking directly into the news cameras. "Our Welcome Week activities got out of hand, and we take full responsibility for that. Omega Rho is committed to fostering a respectful campus environment for all students." Dean Bellamy stepped forward with practiced timing. "This is exactly the kind of student accountability we want to see at North River State. When mistakes happen, we address them through dialogue and education, not punishment that destroys young people's futures." The carefully orchestrated event played perfectly on camera. Grant appeared contrite and mature. The dean seemed reasonable and fair. Omega Rho looked like an organization capable of growth and change. Several students in the gathering crowd rolled their eyes, but the administrators seemed satisfied with the performance. Elijah watched the apology from his dorm room, feeling exhausted by the entire spectacle. Part of him wanted to reject it publicly, to point out how calculated and hollow it sounded. But another part just wanted the attention to die down so he could focus on his classes and his future. He had come to North River to build something better for himself, not to become the center of campus drama. When reporters contacted him for comment, Elijah kept his response simple. "I accept his apology. I just want to move forward and focus on my education." For one brief moment, it seemed like the matter would end there. The news cycle would move on. The campus would return to normal. Elijah could blend back into anonymity and work toward his criminal justice degree in peace. That evening, as Elijah sat at his desk reviewing notes from his first philosophy class, his laptop chimed with a new email notification. The sender was listed as North River State University, Office of Student Conduct. The subject line made his stomach drop. Required disciplinary review. Violent misconduct allegation. Elijah opened the message with steady hands, though his heart rate began to climb as he read the formal language, requiring his attendance at a disciplinary hearing scheduled for Friday afternoon. The email cited multiple reports of aggressive behavior and potential violations of the university's nonviolence policy. He read the message 3 times, each pass making the words feel more surreal. After everything that had happened, after Grant's public apology, after accepting that apology in good faith, they were still coming after him. Elijah stared at the email until the words began to blur. His hands trembled slightly as he reached for his phone and dialed the number he knew by heart. "Grandpa?" Victor's voice came through clear and steady. "Elijah, what's wrong?" "They're trying to discipline me. After everything that happened today. After that fake apology." Elijah's voice cracked slightly. "I don't understand how—" "Slow down, son. Tell me exactly what you're looking at." Elijah read the email word for word. Victor listened without interrupting, his breathing the only sound on the line. "They're scared," Victor said finally. "Scared people make desperate moves, but desperate moves leave evidence." "What kind of evidence?" "The kind that proves they planned this from the beginning. Listen to me carefully, Elijah. Document everything. Save every email, every text, every conversation. Write down times and dates. Truth is your weapon now, but only if you preserve it. What if they expel me? What if I lose my scholarship? Then we fight back harder. But don't let fear make decisions for you. Fear clouds judgment. Stay focused on facts." Elijah closed his eyes. "I should have known the apology was fake. You showed grace. That's not weakness. But now you know who you're dealing with." After hanging up, Elijah spent the night documenting everything he could remember. Every detail from the quad incident. Every word from Grant's apology. Every feeling he'd pushed down to keep the peace. The next morning, he met Naomi at the campus newspaper office in the basement of the communications building. The cramped space smelled like old coffee and printer ink. Stacks of newspapers covered every available surface. "I've been going through everything," Naomi said, pulling up files on her computer. "Look at this." She played her original footage from the quad. The video clearly showed Trevor cracking the egg first, then pushing Elijah twice before Elijah responded. The timestamp proved the entire sequence. "This is perfect evidence," Elijah said. "It shows exactly what happened." Naomi's expression darkened. "That's not the version everyone's seeing now." She opened a second video file. This clip began only when Elijah grabbed Trevor's wrist. The egg attack was completely missing. The shoves were gone. It looked like Elijah had attacked Trevor without provocation. Where did this come from? It's all over social media now. Posted from anonymous accounts, but they're getting thousands of shares. Naomi scrolled through the comments. Look at what people are saying. The comments made Elijah's stomach turn. Words like violent and dangerous appeared over and over. Some users called him a scholarship thug who didn't belong at North River. Someone deliberately edited your footage? No. This is different camera work entirely. Someone else was filming, and they cut it to make you look guilty. Elijah sank into a chair. The apology was just for show. They were planning this the whole time. Gets worse. Naomi pulled up another browser tab. I did some digging on the Holloway family. Grant's father, Preston, is listed as a major university donor. He's funding the new athletics complex that breaks ground next month. So they can't touch his son. Exactly. And guess who Preston called yesterday? Naomi showed him a photo of Dean Bellamy shaking hands with Preston Holloway at a recent fundraising event. They're not just protecting Grant. They're protecting their investment. The manipulation felt suffocating. Every move had been calculated. The public apology made Grant look reasonable while the edited video made Elijah look dangerous. By the time the disciplinary hearing happened, public opinion would be completely turned against him. There has to be something else, Elijah said. Some way to prove this isn't the first time they've done this. Naomi was already opening the newspaper's digital archives. I've been thinking the same thing. If they're this organized, they've had practice. She searched through months of old issues, looking for any mention of Omega Rho or disciplinary actions. Most results showed the fraternity at charity events or campus activities. Nothing controversial. Wait! Naomi stopped scrolling. Look at this! The article was from 18 months ago. The headline read, "Student Transfers Following Campus Adjustment Difficulties." The story was deliberately vague, mentioning only that several students had chosen to transfer to better fit their academic and social needs. That's not much to go on. But look at this buried quote. Naomi highlighted a single sentence near the bottom. "We support all students in finding the right environment for their success," said Dean Margaret Bellamy, responding to questions about recent harassment complaints. Harassment complaints, plural, which means there were multiple incidents, but they buried them. Naomi kept searching through older archives, cross-referencing names and dates from student enrollment records. After an hour of digging, she found something that made her sit up straight. Got it! She pulled up a student directory from 2 years ago and pointed to a name. Darius Bell, listed as a sophomore studying computer science. "He's not in any directories after that semester," Naomi said, "but look at this." She found a single mention of Darius in an old campus safety report. The entry was brief and formal. Complaint filed regarding alleged harassment. Investigation pending. No follow-up reports existed. No resolution. Nothing. Darius Bell had simply disappeared from North River's records. "He transferred," Elijah said quietly. "Just like they want me to do. We need to find him." The campus library's archive room smelled like old paper and dust. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as Elijah and Naomi spread newspaper clippings across a long wooden table. Student directories from the past 5 years lay open beside printed enrollment records Naomi had convinced a sympathetic librarian to access. "Here's another one," Naomi said, pointing to a name circled in red ink. "Marcus Williams, black sophomore. Disappeared from records after filing a complaint about fraternity misconduct 3 years ago." Elijah studied the pattern emerging before them. 6 names so far. All minority students. All gone within months of their complaints. And this one. Naomi slid another directory across the table. Jennifer Morales, Latina freshman who reported harassment to campus security. Transferred the next semester. Same time frame as Darius, Elijah noted. His jaw tightened as the scope became clear. "They've been doing this for years. Look at the language in every single report." Naomi gathered the complaint summaries. Always the same phrases. Alleged misconduct. Investigation pending. Student chose to transfer for personal reasons. Like they're reading from a script. Elijah picked up a campus safety report from 2 years ago. The writing was clinical and cold. Complainant withdrew allegations following mediation session with Dean Bellamy. Matter closed. "Mediation session," he repeated bitterly. "They pressure them until they give up. And guess who's involved in every single case?" Naomi showed him a stack of documents, each bearing the same signature. Margaret Bellamy's name appeared on every resolution, every dismissal, every quiet burial. "She's not just protecting Grant," Elijah said. "She's running the system." The archive room felt smaller now, suffocating. Elijah stood and walked to the window, looking out at students crossing the quad where his humiliation had been filmed just yesterday. Those same students probably thought he was the problem now. "They picked me because I'm older," he said quietly. "Different. Someone they figured had no friends to defend him." "That's exactly what this is about." Naomi gathered the evidence into neat piles. Control through isolation. Make the target look unstable. Then, make them disappear. Elijah's hands clenched into fists. The rage building inside him was different from anything he'd felt during the actual confrontation. This wasn't about one spoiled rich kid cracking an egg. This was systematic, calculated, evil. But Victor's training held him steady. Anger without control was just destruction. We have enough for a story, Naomi said. Names, dates, patterns. This could blow up nationally. First, I have to survive my disciplinary hearing. At 3 o'clock, Elijah sat across from Dean Bellamy in her pristine office. Awards and donor photos covered the walls. Her smile was practiced and empty. Mr. Vance, I want you to know this review is purely procedural, she said, adjusting papers that didn't need adjusting. The university values all our students equally. Then why am I here while Grant Holloway is at fraternity practice? Mr. Holloway participated in our restorative justice process. He apologized publicly. Her tone stayed pleasant, but her eyes hardened. You, however, responded with physical violence. I defended myself. The video evidence suggests otherwise. Bellamy leaned forward slightly. Your scholarship status is under review, Mr. Vance. Any further incidents could result in immediate suspension. I'd hate to see a promising student like yourself lose this opportunity over poor choices. The threat was delivered with the same practiced smile. Elijah understood perfectly. Shut up and disappear, or lose everything. Of course, if your finding North River isn't the right fit, we could facilitate a smooth transfer to another institution. No harm to your academic record. The same offer they'd made to Darius, to Marcus, to Jennifer, to all of them. I'll consider your advice, Elijah said carefully. Walking toward the exit, he passed Grant in the hallway. The fraternity president looked relaxed, confident. He slowed as they approached each other. You know why we picked you, Grant said quietly, just loud enough for Elijah to hear. You looked like someone nobody would miss. The words hit like a physical blow. Not because they hurt, but because they confirmed everything. This wasn't random cruelty. It was targeted elimination. Grant kept walking, whistling softly. Outside the administration building, Naomi waited by the steps. She took one look at Elijah's face and knew. They threatened your scholarship. Among other things. Elijah's voice was steady, but something had shifted. Bellamy offered to help me transfer. Same thing she probably told every other student who complained. So what do we do? Elijah looked back at the building where deals were made and justice was buried, where powerful families bought silence and vulnerable students learned to disappear quietly. We expose them, he said. All of them. Omega Rho, Bellamy, every person protecting this system. The note was waiting on Elijah's door Wednesday morning. Plain white paper, block letters in black marker, no signature. Leave North River before you get hurt. Last warning. Elijah stared at the words. His hands stayed steady, but his jaw tightened. Someone had walked right up to his door while he slept. Someone wanted him scared. Hey, what's that? Jake Morrison, his resident advisor, appeared with a coffee cup and bedhead. Jake was a senior who tried too hard to be everyone's friend. Anonymous note, Elijah said, peeling the tape carefully to preserve fingerprints. Jake squinted at the message and laughed. Probably just some idiot trying to mess with you after that video went viral. You know how freshmen are during welcome week? Everything's a prank. Threatening someone isn't a prank. Come on, man. Last warning? It sounds like a bad movie. Nobody actually talks like that. Jake sipped his coffee and shrugged. I wouldn't sweat it. Campus security deals with this stuff all the time. Elijah folded the note and photographed it with his phone. He sent the image to Naomi with a simple message. Found this on my door. Her response came back immediately. Save everything. This proves they're escalating. In Professor Martinez's Criminal Justice 101 class, whispers followed Elijah to his seat. Some students looked at him with genuine respect. A girl named Sarah nodded approvingly when he sat down. 2 guys gave him subtle thumbs up, but others believed the edited video. They saw him as the aggressor who attacked innocent fraternity brothers. Their stares felt like accusations. The presumption of innocence is fundamental to our justice system, Professor Martinez said, beginning the lecture. Evidence must be examined carefully, not manipulated to fit predetermined conclusions. Elijah wondered if the professor was sending him a message, or just teaching the curriculum. After class, he grabbed lunch at the student center. The dining hall buzzed with conversation, but conversation stopped when he passed certain tables. Students pulled out phones. Some recorded him eating. Others just watched. He was finishing his sandwich when two campus security officers approached. Officer Williams, a middle-aged black man with tired eyes, looked apologetic. His partner, Officer Brooks, seemed eager. "Elijah Vance?" Williams said quietly. "Yes. We need to check your backpack. Routine safety inspection based on a complaint." "What kind of complaint?" "Someone reported suspicious items," Brooks said loudly enough for nearby tables to hear. "Standard procedure." Elijah knew this was theater, public humiliation disguised as policy. But refusing would look worse. "Go ahead." Williams opened the backpack carefully. Textbooks, notebooks, pens, a granola bar, reading glasses, nothing remotely suspicious. "All clear," Williams said, his voice apologetic. Brooks looked disappointed. "Make sure you read the student handbook about prohibited items." They walked away, leaving Elijah sitting alone with his searched belongings while students stared and whispered. The message was clear. You're being watched. You're not safe anywhere. Outside Omega Row House that afternoon, Grant and Trevor sat on the front steps drinking beer in broad daylight. Music blasted from open windows. Fraternity brothers played football on the lawn, shouting and laughing. No consequences, no discipline, no fear. Grant saw Elijah walking to class and raised his beer in a mock toast. Trevor burst out laughing and pointed. They were celebrating. That evening, Naomi's preliminary article appeared in the campus newspaper. The headline read, "Questions remain about fraternity incident response." It was careful, measured, asking why some students faced immediate discipline while others faced none. Dean Bellamy's response came within hours. The North River Tribune should focus on verified facts rather than student speculation. Our disciplinary process is thorough and fair. By 7 o'clock, Elijah needed to move. He drove to Victor's karate school in town, a converted warehouse with mirrored walls and heavy bags. Victor was teaching a children's class when Elijah arrived. 8-year-olds in white uniforms practiced basic kicks, their faces serious with concentration. "Control your power," Victor told them. "Strength without discipline is just chaos." After the kids left, Elijah changed into his GI and began practicing forms. His movements flowed smoothly, each technique precise and controlled. But underneath the discipline, anger burned. Victor watched silently, letting Elijah work through his frustration. Finally, he called for a break. "How bad is it getting?" Victor asked. Elijah told him about the note, the search, the constant watching. Victor listened without interrupting. "They're trying to make you feel isolated," Victor said. "Make you think everyone's against you. Maybe everyone is." "No." Victor's voice was firm. "Some people are, but not everyone. The ones making noise want you to forget about the ones staying quiet." Elijah toweled off sweat and sat on the mat. "What am I supposed to do? They control everything. The administration, the discipline process, the narrative." Victor was quiet for a moment, thinking. Then he looked directly at Elijah. "Bullies fear one thing most," he said. "A victim who keeps records." Thursday morning sunlight streamed through the campus newspaper office windows as Naomi spread papers across 3 desks. Red string-connected photos to dates to complaint forms she had pulled from archived files. Names written in black marker filled index cards, pinned to a large corkboard. "Look at this," she said, as Elijah entered with coffee. 3 years, 3 different students. Same pattern every time. Elijah studied the board. 3 names stood out in bold letters: Darius Bell, Lena Ortiz, Marcus Avery. Darius transferred spring semester 2 years ago, Naomi explained, pointing to his card. Lena Ortiz left after freshman year. Marcus Avery never came back after winter break. All of them filed complaints? All of them had incidents with Omega Rho. All of them went quiet afterward. Naomi tapped each name with her pen. And Dean Bellamy handled every single case personally. Elijah's jaw tightened. "We need to talk to them." "Carefully," Naomi said. "These people left for a reason. If we push too hard, they'll disappear completely." She had already found contact information through alumni records and social media. Darius Bell now attended community college in another state. Lena Ortiz worked at a law firm in Philadelphia. Marcus Avery had joined the military. They decided to start with Darius. Naomi's first message was simple. "Hi, Darius. I'm a journalist at North River investigating student safety. Would you be willing to share your experience confidentially? No names published without your permission." His response came 3 hours later. "Who's asking?" Naomi sent her press credentials and explained about Elijah's situation. She included photos of the egg incident and the edited video circulating online. "Same playbook," Darius replied. "They never change. I'll call tonight at 8. That evening, Elijah and Naomi sat in the empty newsroom with Naomi's laptop open. The video call connected, showing a young black man in a dimly lit apartment. Darius looked older than his 25 years. Tired. Cautious. "You sure this line is secure?" he asked. "As secure as we can make it," Naomi said. "What happened to you?" Darius was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was flat, emotionless. "They invited me to a party, said they wanted to get to know transfer students better. I should have known better, but I was lonely. New school, didn't know anybody." He paused, staring at something off-screen. "There were maybe 20 guys there. They kept giving me drinks, acting friendly. Then, around midnight, they said they had a tradition for new friends. Led me down to the basement." Elijah leaned forward. "What kind of tradition?" "They had this chair set up in the middle of the room. Ropes. A video camera on a tripod." Darius's hands clenched into fists. "They tied me to the chair and said I had to prove I belonged at North River. Then they started pouring stuff on me." "What kind of stuff?" "Spoiled milk, rotten eggs, food that had been sitting in the sun for days. They had buckets of it." His voice cracked slightly. The whole time they were chanting, "Cleanse the outsider, cleanse the outsider," like it was some kind of ritual. Naomi's pen froze over her notepad. Elijah felt his chest tighten with rage. "Grant Holloway was there," Darius continued. "He wasn't president yet, but he was leading the chant. Trevor Pike filmed everything. They said if I ever told anyone, they'd release the video and claim I begged them to do it." "How long did it last?" Elijah asked quietly. 2 hours. When they finally untied me, I was covered in maggots. They made me walk back to my dorm like that. Students saw me. Some laughed. Some took pictures. Elijah's hands were shaking. Naomi reached over and touched his arm, keeping him grounded. "What happened when you reported it?" Dean Bellamy called me into her office the next day. Said she'd heard about an incident and wanted my side of the story. I told her everything. Darius laughed bitterly. "She said campus culture can be misunderstood. That boys will be boys. That maybe I misinterpreted friendly hazing. She blamed you? She said if I kept making accusations, it might look like I couldn't handle college social life. Said North River had a reputation to protect." Darius stared directly into the camera. "Then Preston Holloway called my dad." Naomi and Elijah exchanged glances. What did he say? Dad worked construction for Holloway Development, had worked there for 15 years. Preston told him his son was causing problems at the university. Said it would be unfortunate if family issues affected employee performance. The threat was clear. Stay quiet, or your father loses his job. So you transferred, Elijah said. 2 weeks later. Dad never knew why. I told him I didn't like North River's academics. Darius rubbed his forehead. He still works for Preston Holloway. Still doesn't know what really happened. The call went quiet. Elijah could hear his own heartbeat. They're doing it again, Darius said finally. Aren't they? Yeah, Elijah said. They are. Be careful. These people destroy lives for entertainment. They're not just rich. They're connected. Darius leaned closer to his camera. But maybe this time is different. Why? Because you fought back. I never did. I just took it and ran. After the call ended, Naomi and Elijah sat in stunned silence. The corkboard full of names and dates suddenly felt heavier. More serious. This wasn't college pranks or fraternity stupidity. This was organized abuse. 2 hours, Elijah said quietly. They tortured him for 2 hours. And filmed it. Elijah stood and paced to the window. Students walked across the quad below, laughing and talking. Normal college life. None of them knew what happened in Omega Row's basement. We're going to expose all of this, he said, carefully. Darius is still scared after 3 years. If we mess this up... Naomi's laptop chimed with a new email notification. She glanced at the screen and froze. What is it? She clicked the message open. The sender was listed as a friend. You're asking the right questions. Here's what you need to see. Below the message was a video file attachment. Should we open it? Naomi asked. Elijah moved behind her chair, looking at the screen. The file name was simple. BasementHazing.mp4. Open it, he said. Naomi's apartment was smaller than Elijah's dorm room. Books stacked against every wall. A laptop balanced on a folding table. Empty coffee cups scattered across surfaces like evidence of sleepless nights. Victor sat in the only real chair, his weathered hands folded calmly in his lap. Elijah paced near the window. Naomi hovered over her laptop, cursor frozen above the video file. Play it, Elijah said. She double-clicked. The screen filled with grainy footage of a concrete basement. Harsh fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. The camera angle suggested someone filming secretly from behind stacked boxes. Grant Holloway's voice echoed off bare walls. Welcome to Hell Week, pledges! 6 young men knelt on the filthy floor wearing only underwear. Their faces were streaked with sweat and dirt. Some shook with fear. Others stared at the ground in humiliation. Trevor Pike stood behind them, holding a wooden paddle. Crawl! Grant shouted. Crawl like the dogs you are! The pledges dropped to hands and knees. They crawled across broken glass, spilled beer, and garbage, while fraternity brothers laughed and recorded on phones. Elijah's jaw tightened. He recognized one face immediately. Caleb Monroe, the nervous kid from freshman orientation, who asked about study groups and financial aid requirements. Caleb's thin frame shook as he crawled through the mess. Faster! Grant kicked Caleb in the ribs. Not hard enough to seriously injure, but hard enough to hurt. You think scholarship kids deserve respect? Earn it. Trevor raised the paddle and brought it down across another pledge's back. The crack echoed through the basement. The young man cried out, but kept crawling. This is sick, Naomi whispered. Victor leaned forward, studying the screen with sharp eyes. His expression remained calm, but Elijah caught the subtle tension in his grandfather's shoulders. Stop it, Victor said quietly. Naomi paused the video. The screen froze on Grant's laughing face as he stood over the crawling pledges. You see something? Elijah asked. Victor pointed to the basement wall behind Grant. There, the framed photo. Elijah squinted. A formal photograph hung on the cement wall, showing two men in expensive suits shaking hands. Below the frame was a small plaque. Can you zoom in? Victor asked. Naomi clicked and dragged, enlarging that section of the screen. The image became clearer. Preston Holloway and Dean Margaret Bellamy, both smiling broadly. The plaque read, North River Athletic Complex, groundbreaking. Major donor recognition. They're connected, Elijah said. More than connected, Victor replied. This photo is displayed like a trophy in their hazing basement. His voice remained steady, but steel crept into his tone. They're proud of that relationship. Naomi stared at the screen. This proves everything. The hazing, the university protection, Preston Holloway's influence. We publish this tomorrow, Elijah said. Let the whole world see what these monsters do. Wait. Victor held up one hand. What about the boy you recognized? Caleb? Elijah looked at his grandfather. What about him? If you publish this without warning him, he becomes a target. Grant will know he's the one who leaked the video, even if he didn't. Naomi nodded slowly. Victor's right. We need to protect the victims before we expose the abuse. So what do? We talk to Caleb first, Victor said. Give him a choice. Let him decide if he's ready to stand up or if he needs more time. Elijah understood. His grandfather wasn't just thinking about justice. He was thinking about the people who would get hurt in the crossfire. The next morning, they found Caleb Monroe sitting alone at a corner table in the dining hall. His breakfast tray held only toast and black coffee. Dark circles shadowed his eyes like he hadn't slept in weeks. Elijah approached carefully. Caleb, can we talk? Caleb looked up, startled. Recognition flickered across his face, followed by immediate panic. I can't talk to you, he said quickly. I'm sorry about what happened on the quad, but I can't. We know about the basement, Naomi said quietly. Caleb's face went pale. He gripped his coffee cup with white knuckles. I don't know what you mean. Elijah sat across from him without invitation. Naomi slid into the seat beside Elijah. Students chatted and laughed at nearby tables, oblivious to the tension. Someone sent us a video, Elijah said. From Omega Rose Hell Week. Caleb's hands started shaking. Coffee sloshed over the rim of his cup onto the table. We're not here to force you into anything, Naomi said gently. We just want you to know the truth is coming out, with or without your help. You don't understand, Caleb whispered. Grant said if anyone talked about initiation, he'd make sure we lost our scholarships. He has connections in the financial aid office. He can destroy us. He told you that? He showed us letters, complaints from previous years that got students expelled. Said the university always believes Omega Rho over troublemaking pledges. Caleb looked directly at Elijah. He mentioned you specifically. What did he say? That you were just another scholarship case who didn't know his place. That by Christmas break, you'd be gone like all the others. Elijah felt familiar rage building in his chest. The same fury he'd controlled on the quad. But this time, the anger burned colder, more focused. What if I told you Grant was lying? He said. What if I told you there's a way to stop him? You can't stop him. His family owns half this town. Money doesn't make you untouchable, Naomi said. Truth does. Caleb stared at both of them. His fear was real, but something else flickered in his eyes. Hope, maybe, or desperation. What would you need from me? A written statement, Naomi said, describing what happened in that basement, what Grant said, what they made you do. And then we publish everything. The video, your statement, the pattern of abuse, all of it. Caleb was quiet for a long time. Students continued eating and laughing around them, unaware that one conversation might change everything. They'll know it was me, he said finally. Not if we protect your identity until we have undeniable proof, Elijah said. Once the whole story breaks, you won't be alone anymore. Caleb looked at Elijah carefully. You really think this will work? I know what it feels like to be cornered, Elijah said. To feel like powerful people can crush you whenever they want. But running away doesn't stop them. It just makes them hunt someone else. Caleb nodded slowly. The fear in his eyes didn't disappear, but it mixed with something stronger. Okay, he whispered. I'll write the statement. The campus newspaper office buzzed with nervous energy Friday morning. Naomi sat hunched over her laptop, fingers flying across the keyboard as she polished the final draft of her exposé. Coffee cups and energy drink cans littered her desk like battle debris. Read this section again, she said to Elijah, pointing at the screen. I want to make sure every single word is bulletproof. Elijah leaned over her shoulder and read aloud. Sources confirm that Omega Rho fraternity has systematically targeted minority students for harassment over multiple academic years, with university administrators consistently failing to investigate complaints or impose meaningful consequences. Perfect, he said. No wiggle room for their lawyers. Naomi had spent hours organizing the evidence into devastating clarity. The article opened with the full, unedited footage of the egg prank, showing Trevor's premeditated attack and Elijah's restrained response. Darius Bell's testimony appeared under a pseudonym, describing his humiliation and the administration's threats to silence him. The basement hazing video stills were carefully edited to protect victim identities while clearly showing Grant's face as he orchestrated the abuse. You sure about publishing the Holloway financial records? Elijah asked. Preston Holloway donated $2 million the same month his son's previous assault complaint disappeared, Naomi said firmly. That's not coincidence. That's corruption. At 10 a.m. sharp, Naomi hit publish. The article exploded across campus within minutes. Students forwarded links through group chats, social media feeds, and email lists. By 10:30, the story had reached regional blogs. By 11:15, national college news websites picked it up. Elijah watched his phone buzz constantly with notifications. Friends from his hometown were sharing the article. Former co-workers from the construction site were commenting supportively. Even his old high school teachers were reaching out. Look outside, Naomi said, pointing through the newspaper office window. A crowd was gathering on the quad. Students carried hastily made signs reading, Expel Omega Rho and No More Cover-Ups. The group marched toward the fraternity house, chanting loudly enough to be heard 3 blocks away. Elijah's chest tightened. This was really happening. People believed him. People cared. At noon, Dean Bellamy held an emergency press conference outside the administration building. Reporters from 3 local news stations aimed cameras at her as she read from a prepared statement. North River State University takes all allegations of student misconduct seriously, she said in her practiced administrator voice. Effective immediately, Omega Rho fraternity is suspended pending a complete investigation. Elijah watched the live stream from the newspaper office. Bellamy looked calm and in control, as if she'd been planning swift action all along instead of protecting the fraternity for years. She's trying to get ahead of this, Naomi said, making herself look like the solution instead of the problem. But something else caught Elijah's attention. In the background of the press conference, he spotted Grant Holloway walking quickly toward a black SUV. The fraternity president's usual smug confidence was gone. His shoulders were hunched, and he kept looking around nervously as reporters shouted questions at him. For the first time since the egg incident, Grant looked genuinely rattled. You see that? Elijah asked, pointing at the screen. Yeah, Naomi smiled. He's scared. Victor called around 2 p.m. Saw the article online, he said. Good work. But remember what I taught you about cornered animals. They fight hardest right before they fall, Elijah recited. Exactly. Stay alert. This isn't over. That evening, Elijah and Naomi met at Murphy's Diner, a quiet place near campus where students rarely went. They ordered burgers and sat in a back booth, finally allowing themselves to relax. I can't believe it actually worked, Naomi said, stealing one of his fries. 3 days ago, nobody would listen to us. Now, the whole country is talking about Omega Rho. It feels too easy, Elijah admitted, like something's missing. Maybe we're just not used to winning. For the first time in weeks, Elijah smiled genuinely. The weight on his shoulders felt lighter. Students had stood up for him. The truth was spreading faster than lies. Justice might actually be possible. Across town in a dimly lit parking lot behind an abandoned gas station, Grant Holloway paced angrily beside his BMW. His hands shook as he scrolled through news articles about his fraternity. Every major college blog was running Naomi's story. His father had already called twice, screaming about family reputation and political consequences. Trevor Pike sat nervously on the hood of his pickup truck, watching Grant's meltdown. "We need proof that Elijah is dangerous," Grant said finally, stopping his pacing. "Something that shows he's been planning to hurt fraternity members all along." "What kind of proof?" Grant's eyes went cold and calculating. "The kind we create ourselves." The cool October air felt good against Elijah's face as he walked back from Murphy's Diner. His stomach was full, and for the first time in days, his mind felt clear. Naomi's article was spreading across the internet like wildfire. Students were finally seeing the truth about Omega Rho. Maybe Victor was wrong about cornered animals. Maybe sometimes the good guys actually won. The campus parking garage loomed ahead, its concrete levels stacked like gray tombstones against the night sky. Security lights cast long shadows between the support pillars. Elijah's dorm was just past the garage, a 5-minute walk through the quiet part of campus. He pulled out his phone to text Naomi a thank you message when footsteps echoed behind him. "Well, well, look who we found." Elijah turned slowly. Trevor Pike stepped out from behind a concrete pillar, flanked by Mason Reed and 2 other Omega Rho brothers he recognized from the quad incident. They spread out in a loose semicircle, blocking his path forward. "Going somewhere, karate boy?" Trevor's voice carried a sharp edge that hadn't been there during their first encounter. Elijah's grandfather's training kicked in immediately. Assess the situation. Count the opponents. Look for exits. Stay calm. 4 against 1. The stairwell to his left led up to the second parking level. The ramp behind them curved down toward the street. No security cameras visible in this section. They'd chosen their spot carefully. "I don't want any trouble," Elijah said, keeping his voice steady. Mason laughed, holding up his phone. "Trouble? We're just having a conversation." "Yeah," said one of the other brothers, a thick-necked guy with a football jersey. "About how you've been running your mouth to reporters." Trevor stepped closer. "You think you're smart, don't you? Getting your little girlfriend to write hit pieces about us. She wrote the truth. She wrote lies." Trevor's voice cracked with anger. "And now my dad's threatening to cut off my trust fund because of you." Elijah noticed something odd. Mason wasn't just holding his phone casually. He was recording. The camera was pointed directly at them. "You made your choices," Elijah said carefully. "Nobody forced you to crack that egg on my head." "That was a joke, you psycho!" The football player shoved Elijah hard in the shoulder. "But you turned it into some racist conspiracy theory." Elijah absorbed the push without stumbling, his feet automatically shifting into a defensive stance. "I'm walking away now." "No, you're not." Trevor blocked his path. "We want an apology. A real one. On camera." "For what?" "For lying about us. For trying to destroy our futures over a harmless prank." Elijah looked at each of their faces. Trevor's jaw was clenched with barely controlled rage. Mason's eyes kept darting between his phone and the action. The other two looked nervous, like they weren't entirely sure what they were supposed to be doing. This wasn't random anger. This was planned. "I'm not apologizing for telling the truth," Elijah said. Trevor's face twisted with fury. "Then you're going to learn what real violence looks like, you arrogant piece of—" He swung a wild haymaker at Elijah's head. Elijah ducked smoothly, letting Trevor's momentum carry him past. The second attacker lunged forward, and Elijah sidestepped, using the man's own force to guide him into the concrete pillar with a gentle push. "Stop recording this!" one of them yelled. "Keep recording!" Trevor shouted back, scrambling to his feet. "We need proof he attacked us." Mason kept the camera rolling as Trevor charged again. This time, Elijah caught his wrist, twisted slightly, and used a basic hip throw to drop him onto the concrete. Not hard enough to injure, just enough to stop the attack. Trevor hit the ground and immediately rolled away from Elijah, gasping. "Stay down," Elijah warned, breathing hard but controlled. Instead, Trevor did something that made Elijah's blood run cold. The fraternity president grabbed his own head with both hands and slammed his face directly into the concrete pillar. The sickening crack echoed through the garage. Blood poured from Trevor's nose and mouth as he collapsed, moaning dramatically. "Oh my God!" Mason screamed, still recording. "He's attacking Trevor! Somebody help us!" "What are you doing?" Elijah stared in horror as Trevor writhed on the ground, blood streaming down his face. "I didn't touch your head." "Help!" the football player shouted toward the street. "This guy's going crazy! He's trying to kill us!" Police sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder by the second. Too fast. Way too fast. They were already on their way before the fight even started. Elijah's heart sank as he realized the depth of the trap. This wasn't just about provoking him into violence. They'd planned every detail, including the police response. Campus security vehicles screeched into the parking garage, followed immediately by city police cars. Officers poured out with flashlights and radios crackling. "Over here!" Mason yelled, pointing at Elijah while keeping his phone camera steady. "This guy just attacked us for no reason." "That's not what happened," Elijah said, as officers approached with hands on their weapons. "They ambushed me. I was defending myself." "Save it for the judge, kid," one officer said, pulling out handcuffs. "Turn around." "Wait, you need to see the whole video." "Turn around now," Elijah complied, his mind racing. Where was the security footage from the garage? Why weren't the officers asking questions about how 4 students ended up cornering one? As the handcuffs clicked around his wrists, he saw Naomi running toward them from across the campus quad. "Elijah!" she shouted. "What's happening?" "Ma'am, stay back." An officer blocked her path. "This is an active crime scene." "He's my friend." "What are you charging him with?" "Assault and battery." Trevor was loaded onto a stretcher, still conscious but playing up his injuries for maximum effect. His nose was definitely broken, and blood covered the front of his shirt. To anyone who hadn't witnessed the self-inflicted injury, it looked like the result of a brutal beating. Mason approached one of the senior officers, still clutching his phone. "I got the whole thing on video," he said breathlessly. "This maniac just started swinging at us when we tried to talk to him about his newspaper lies. We'll need that footage for evidence. Already sent it to Dean Bellamy. She needs to know how dangerous this guy really is." Elijah was pushed into the back of a police car, watching helplessly as Naomi argued with officers who refused to let her near the scene. The concrete garage walls felt like they were closing in around him. By dawn, he sat alone in a holding cell at the county jail, still wearing his blood-stained shirt from the diner. His ribs ached from where the football player had shoved him. His wrists were raw from the handcuffs, but the physical pain was nothing compared to the crushing weight of realization settling over him. Grant had been 3 steps ahead the entire time. The suspension, the article, even Bellamy's press conference, it had all been theater designed to make Omega Rho look like victims when they finally sprung their real trap. Elijah pressed his back against the cold concrete wall and closed his eyes. The system hadn't just failed him. It had been designed to swallow him whole from the very beginning. Victor Vance stood outside the county jail at 7 in the morning, his weathered hands gripping a small duffel bag. His silver hair caught the early sunlight, and his posture remained perfectly straight despite his 72 years. When the heavy doors finally opened and Elijah walked out, Victor's expression didn't change. Elijah looked exhausted. His clothes were wrinkled and stained. Dark circles shadowed his eyes. But he walked with the same quiet dignity that had carried him through the parking garage ambush. "Grandpa," Elijah said quietly. "Son." Victor handed him the bag without ceremony. "Clean clothes. We're not going back to campus yet." They drove through the morning traffic in Victor's old pickup truck, the silence heavy but not uncomfortable. Elijah stared out the passenger window at the suburban streets leading away from North River State. Students were probably waking up in their dorms right now, getting ready for weekend parties and football games. He was officially homeless. "Dean Bellamy called me at 5 this morning," Victor said finally. "Wanted to make sure I understood the seriousness of your situation. How you attacked innocent students. How the university had no choice but to protect its community." Elijah's jaw tightened. "And?" "I told her I'd seen the real footage. Asked her why she was so eager to believe edited videos over witness testimony." "What did she say?" Victor's hands gripped the steering wheel tighter. "That sometimes good students make bad choices under pressure." They pulled into the parking lot behind Victor's karate school, a modest building with faded paint and a hand-lettered sign. Elijah had spent countless hours here as a teenager, learning discipline and control from the man who had raised him after his parents died. Inside, the familiar smell of worn mats and disinfectant brought back memories of simpler battles. Victor unlocked his office and pointed toward the small bathroom. "Get cleaned up. We need to talk." When Elijah emerged wearing fresh jeans and a t-shirt, Victor was sitting at his desk with 2 cups of coffee and a serious expression. "I should have told you this earlier," Victor began. "When you first mentioned Grant Holloway's name, I recognized it. Didn't want to worry you over old ghosts." Elijah sat down across from him. "What kind of ghosts?" 23 years ago, Preston Holloway's son was at Westfield University. Different boy, Grant's older brother. There was a hazing incident that went wrong. A freshman named David Kim died in a fraternity basement. The words hit Elijah like ice water. Died. Alcohol poisoning mixed with physical abuse. The fraternity brothers panicked and waited 6 hours before calling for help. Victor's voice stayed steady, but his eyes burned. Preston Holloway made that case disappear. Witnesses suddenly refused to testify. Evidence went missing from police files. The family got a quiet settlement, and David Kim became a tragic accident instead of a murder. Elijah stared at his grandfather. "How do you know all this?" "Because I tried to help David's family fight back. I knew a journalist who was investigating the cover-up." Victor pulled out his phone. "Lorraine Mercer. She's retired now, but she never stopped collecting evidence on families like the Holloways." "You called her?" 3 days ago, when I realized what you were really up against. She's been waiting for someone with the courage to stand up to Preston Holloway again." Meanwhile, across town, Naomi sat in the campus newspaper office staring at her computer screen with growing fury. She had spent the entire night analyzing the garage footage that Dean Bellamy used to justify Elijah's suspension. The metadata told an impossible story. The video file had been created at 10:47 p.m. on Friday night, more than an hour before the actual incident occurred. But more damning was the digital signature embedded in the code. It came from the university's own surveillance system archives. Someone with administrative access had pulled old footage of Elijah from various campus locations and spliced it together with Friday night's ambush to create a narrative of unprovoked violence. The university hadn't just helped cover up the attack. They had actively participated in framing him. Naomi's phone buzzed with a text from Victor. "Bring your laptop to the karate school. We have work to do." She grabbed her equipment and ran for the door, knowing that whatever Victor had discovered would change everything. At the karate school, Elijah was still processing the revelation about Preston Holloway's history when car tires crunched on gravel outside. Victor looked through the window and nodded. "She's here." The front door opened, and a woman in her late 60s entered, carrying a battered cardboard file box. Lorraine Mercer had silver hair pulled back in a practical bun, and sharp eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. She wore a worn leather jacket and moved with the purposeful energy of someone who had spent decades chasing down lies. She set the box on Victor's desk with a heavy thump and looked directly at Elijah. "You must be the young man who's been giving the Holloways nightmares," she said. "Good." Lorraine patted the box affectionately. 23 years of research, interviews, and documentation that certain people thought was buried forever. She smiled grimly as she lifted the lid, revealing hundreds of documents, photographs, and recorded testimonies. They were wrong. Lorraine spread the documents across Victor's desk like a prosecutor laying out evidence for a jury. Her weathered hands moved with practiced efficiency, organizing decades of buried truth into neat piles. "Start here," she said, sliding a thick manila folder toward Elijah. "Settlement agreements from Westfield University, 1999 to 2003. Preston Holloway's fraternity days." Elijah opened the file and felt his stomach drop. Page after page of legal documents, all bearing the same pattern. Students filing complaints, investigations beginning, then sudden withdrawals of charges followed by sealed settlements. "David Martinez wasn't the only one," Lorraine continued. "Preston's fraternity hospitalized 6 different students during his 4 years there. Every case disappeared after his father's law firm wrote checks. Victor pointed to a bank record showing a $180,000 payment to David's family. "Blood money," he said quietly, and it bought 23 years of silence. Naomi pulled out her laptop and began cross-referencing the old settlement amounts with North River's recent donor records. Her fingers flew across the keyboard as connections formed on the screen. "Look at this," she said, turning the laptop toward the group. Preston Holloway donated $2.3 million to North River over the past 5 years. Every single donation came within weeks of a complaint being filed against Omega Rho. She scrolled through Dean Bellamy's official calendar, which Naomi had obtained through a student records request months earlier. "Here's a private meeting between Bellamy and Preston on September 15th, the day after Darius Bell filed his harassment complaint. 2 weeks later, Darius transferred schools. The money isn't donations," Elijah realized. "It's bribes," Lorraine nodded approvingly. "Now you're thinking like an investigator." Preston learned early that buying silence is cheaper than facing consequences. Elijah's phone buzzed with a message from Caleb Monroe. His hands shook as he read it aloud. "I can't stay quiet anymore. Grant told us the basement hazing was practice for dealing with problem students who don't know their place. He said his father taught him that every campus has students who need to be reminded they don't belong. I have recordings from pledge meetings if you need them." "Caleb's ready to testify," Elijah said, showing the message to the others. Naomi's phone rang. It was Darius Bell. "I saw the news about your suspension," Darius said when she answered on speaker. "I also heard other victims are finally coming forward. If there's going to be a hearing, I want to testify. In person. With my name attached." His voice was steady but angry. Preston Holloway threatened my father's construction business to keep me quiet. Well, my dad started his own company last year, and we don't owe the Holloways anything anymore." Elijah felt a surge of vindication, but his first instinct was still confrontation. "We should go to Grant right now. Show him what we have. Make him face the truth." Victor shook his head firmly. "That's exactly what Preston wants. A private confrontation where they can claim you threatened them again." "Your grandfather's right," Lorraine added. "Justice that happens in shadows can be buried in shadows. This needs to happen where everyone can see it." Naomi was already typing on her laptop. "The university owes public transparency. They created a public scandal when they suspended you based on doctored video. Now they need to defend their actions in public." She pulled up the online petition platform and began crafting a demand for the disciplinary hearing to be live-streamed. Students have the right to see how their administration handles accusations of institutional corruption. Within an hour, the petition had 300 signatures. By evening, it reached 2,000. Student protesters gathered outside the administration building carrying signs reading, "Stream the hearing," and "No more secret cover-ups." Local news trucks appeared on campus as the story gained momentum. Dean Bellamy found herself trapped between public pressure and Preston Holloway's private threats. She had no choice but to schedule an emergency hearing for Sunday morning, complete with live video coverage. What Bellamy didn't know was that Naomi had already sent copies of Lorraine's evidence files to reporters at 3 national newspapers, along with a detailed timeline of the university's cover-up pattern. The trap was set. Now, they just had to spring it perfectly. Sunday afternoon arrived with the weight of inevitability. North River's disciplinary auditorium had never seen anything like this. Every seat was filled. Students packed the aisles. Camera crews positioned their equipment along the walls, while live-stream viewers climbed into the thousands. The air buzzed with tension and anticipation. This wasn't just about one suspended student anymore. Everyone knew they were watching something bigger unfold. Dean Margaret Bellamy entered wearing her most serious expression, flanked by 2 university lawyers. She carried herself with practiced authority, but her hands trembled slightly as she arranged her papers. "This hearing will determine the facts surrounding recent incidents involving student Elijah Vance," she announced into the microphone. "The university seeks only fairness and truth." Her voice carried false solemnity, as if she truly cared about justice rather than damage control. Grant Holloway sat in the front row beside his father Preston. Both men wore expensive suits and confident smirks. Grant kept checking his phone and whispering to Preston as if victory was already guaranteed. They looked like spectators at someone else's execution. Preston's presence said everything. This wasn't a student disciplinary matter. This was a power play. Elijah entered with Naomi, Victor, and Lorraine. The contrast was striking. Where the Holloways radiated entitled confidence, Elijah moved with quiet dignity. His grandfather walked beside him like a protective shadow. Naomi carried a laptop bag stuffed with evidence. Lorraine held her weathered file box close to her chest. Students throughout the auditorium straightened in their seats. Many had never seen Elijah before, but his calm presence commanded respect. "We'll begin with video evidence of the parking garage incident," Bellamy announced, dimming the lights. The edited footage played on the large screen. It showed Elijah apparently attacking Trevor Pike and Mason Reed without provocation. Trevor's bloodied face filled the frame as he screamed about unprovoked violence. The clip ended with Elijah being arrested. Grant's smirk widened. Several university board members nodded gravely. The edited version made Elijah look like exactly what they wanted him to appear: dangerous, unstable, violent. "This clearly shows," Bellamy began. "No," Naomi interrupted, standing. It shows edited lies. She walked to the front of the room and connected her laptop to the projection system. This is the complete, unedited surveillance footage from university cameras. The real video began playing. It showed Elijah walking peacefully toward his dorm. Trevor, Mason, and 2 other Omega Rho members appeared from behind concrete pillars, surrounding him. Their faces were clearly visible. Their aggressive postures were obvious. The audio captured their taunts. "Time to teach the karate boy a real lesson. Nobody's filming now. Let's see how tough you are when it's 4 against 1. The room went silent, except for gasps from the audience. The footage showed Trevor throwing the first punch. It showed Elijah defending himself with minimal force. It showed Trevor deliberately smashing his own face against a concrete pillar after Elijah released him. It showed Mason hiding behind a car with a camera, recording only the moments that made Elijah look guilty. The auditorium erupted. Students shouted in outrage. Reporters frantically took notes. Grant's confident expression cracked. Preston grabbed his son's arm, whispering urgently. "Order!" Bellamy demanded, but her voice lacked authority. She looked pale and shaken. The next witnesses appeared by video conference. Caleb Monroe's nervous face filled the screen. Grant Holloway told us that basement hazing was practice for dealing with problem students who don't know their place, Caleb testified, his voice growing stronger with each word. He said his father taught him that every campus has students who need to be reminded they don't belong. He threatened my financial aid when I wanted to quit pledging. Darius Bell appeared next, speaking with years of suppressed anger finally unleashed. Dean Bellamy called me into her office after I filed a harassment complaint against Omega Rho, he said. She told me that campus culture can be misunderstood. She said black students sometimes interpret normal behavior as discrimination. When I insisted on pursuing the complaint, Preston Holloway called my father's construction company and threatened to cancel their contracts. Preston Holloway stood abruptly, trying to leave through the side exit. But reporters blocked the aisle, cameras rolling, microphones thrust toward his face. "Mr. Holloway, do you have a comment about the witness testimony?" "Sir, did you threaten Darius Bell's family?" Preston's face turned red with fury. "This is harassment! Move!" Lorraine Mercer stepped forward, her weathered hands steady as she placed her file box on the witness table. "The parking garage video is only the beginning," she announced, her voice carrying the weight of decades in investigative journalism. "What the Holloway family buried goes much deeper than anyone imagined." Lorraine opened the first folder with deliberate precision. The auditorium fell silent except for the hum of live stream cameras capturing every moment. In 2019, Preston Holloway's influence buried the death of David Kim at Westfield University, she began, her voice cutting through the tension like a blade. Kim died during a hazing ritual that Holloway's older son organized. The family paid $2 million to silence witnesses and destroy evidence. She held up photocopied documents, bank records, settlement agreements, legal correspondence with official letterheads. "These are the original files the Holloway lawyers thought they destroyed," Lorraine continued. "But David Kim's roommate kept copies. He's been waiting 24 years for someone to care about the truth." Preston's face went ashen. Grant stared at his father in shock, clearly learning about his dead brother's crime for the first time. Lorraine pulled out the second folder. "These are emails between Preston Holloway and Dean Bellamy from this past week." She read aloud, "Margaret, the Vance situation requires immediate resolution. The athletics complex funding depends on protecting our family reputation. Handle this quietly, or find new employment." Dean Bellamy's mouth dropped open. Students in the auditorium began shouting angrily. The live stream viewer count climbed past 50,000 people. Another email. Dean Bellamy to Preston Holloway. Elijah Vance has been suspended and his scholarship frozen. The edited garage footage provides justification for expulsion. Grant's future is protected. The evidence was devastating, systematic, undeniable. Naomi stepped forward, her voice steady despite the chaos surrounding them. Dean Bellamy has buried 17 complaints against Omega Rho in the past 5 years, she announced, holding up her own research files. Darius Bell wasn't alone. Neither was Lena Ortiz. Neither was Marcus Avery. Every time a minority student filed harassment charges, Bellamy intimidated them into silence while protecting the fraternity. She displayed a chart showing the pattern. Complaint filed, donor pressure applied, student mysteriously transfers or drops charges. "This isn't about college pranks," Naomi declared. "This is about institutional racism protected by money and power." Trevor Pike sat frozen in his chair, sweat beading on his forehead as the evidence mounted. Grant leaned over and whispered urgently in his ear, "You're taking the fall for everything. Dad's lawyers are already preparing your charges." Trevor's eyes widened in horror. "What? You said—" "I said a lot of things," Grant hissed. "But you're the one who cracked the egg. You're the one who threw the first punch in the garage. Your face is on every video." The betrayal shattered Trevor's loyalty instantly. His fear transformed into rage. Trevor shot to his feet, pointing an accusing finger at Grant. "That's a lie," he screamed, his voice echoing through the auditorium. "Grant Holloway ordered everything. The egg prank was his idea. He told me which student to target. He planned the parking garage ambush. He ordered Mason to edit the surveillance video." The live stream audience exploded. Comments flooded the screen faster than anyone could read them. Students in the auditorium rose from their seats, shouting for justice. Grant's carefully constructed facade cracked completely. Years of entitled arrogance erupted into pure rage. "You pathetic piece of garbage," Grant roared, lunging toward Elijah with both fists raised. "This is all your fault. You should have stayed quiet like every other nobody." But Elijah remained perfectly calm. As Grant charged forward, Elijah simply stepped 1 foot to the left, his body moving with fluid precision. Grant's momentum carried him past his intended target. Unable to stop or change direction, he crashed face first into the heavy wooden hearing table. The impact sent papers flying and knocked over a water pitcher. Grant's nose cracked audibly against the solid oak surface. He collapsed to the floor, blood streaming from his nostrils, writhing in pain while 50,000 viewers watched his complete humiliation. The auditorium erupted in chaos. Students began chanting, "Lock him up! Lock him up!" Campus police rushed through the back doors, their radios crackling with urgent communications. Dean Bellamy tried to flee through the side exit, but security officers blocked her path. "Dean Bellamy, you're under investigation for obstruction of justice and conspiracy," one officer announced, taking her arm firmly. Preston Holloway watched in horror as handcuffs clicked around his son's wrists. Monday morning sunlight bathed North River State University's main quad in golden light. Exactly 1 week had passed since Trevor Pike cracked an egg over Elijah Vance's head in this same spot. Now, everything had changed. Students gathered around bulletin boards and phone screens, reading the official announcements that had flooded campus email accounts at dawn. The university's response was swift and decisive, driven by national media attention and state pressure that made delay impossible. Omega Rho fraternity was permanently expelled from North River State University. Their charter was revoked. Their house would be converted into a student counseling center. Dean Margaret Bellamy had submitted her resignation effective immediately. State investigators were already examining her financial records and correspondence with major donors. Grant Holloway faced multiple criminal charges: assault, conspiracy, obstruction of justice, and civil rights violations. His father, Preston Holloway, was under federal investigation for donor fraud and witness intimidation across 3 universities. Trevor Pike had accepted a plea deal in exchange for full cooperation with prosecutors. His testimony would be used against Grant and the broader conspiracy. His public confession during the hearing had already destroyed any chance of defending his actions. The North River Board of Trustees announced a comprehensive investigation into donor influence over disciplinary decisions. They promised transparency and accountability measures that should have existed years ago. Elijah walked across the same patch of grass where egg yolk had dripped from his hair. Today, he carried a leather folder containing his fully restored academic records. His scholarship was not just renewed, it was expanded to cover graduate school if he chose to continue his criminal justice studies. His housing assignment was upgraded to a single room in the honors dormitory. The university had expunged every disciplinary notation from his file. They had also extended an unprecedented offer. They wanted Elijah to help design a new student protection and anti-hazing initiative that would serve as a national model. The irony was not lost on him. The administration that had tried to silence him now needed his voice to rebuild their credibility. Naomi Whitaker had become a campus celebrity overnight. Her investigative work earned coverage in major newspapers and television networks. 3 journalism schools had already offered her transfer scholarships. A national magazine wanted to hire her as a campus correspondent. She walked beside Elijah now, carrying her camera as always, documenting the changed atmosphere. "Look at that," she said, pointing toward Victor's karate school visible through the campus gates. A line of students stretched down the block, waiting to enroll in martial arts classes. Victor had been forced to hire 2 additional instructors and extend evening hours to meet demand. Parents were driving from neighboring towns to register their children. The dojo that had operated quietly for decades was suddenly the most popular destination in the city. Victor understood what was happening. Young people had watched Elijah demonstrate that strength didn't require rage, that discipline defeated chaos, that quiet confidence terrified bullies more than screaming ever could. They wanted to learn that kind of power. As Elijah and Naomi crossed the quad's center, voices rose near the stone benches where students often ate lunch. A nervous-looking freshman sat alone, clutching his textbooks, while 2 upperclassmen stood over him, making comments about his clothes. "Nice shoes, scholarship boy. Did you get those from a donation bin? Maybe he should transfer somewhere more affordable." Elijah's jaw tightened. He took a step forward, ready to intervene. But he never got the chance. 4 different students approached the bullies from different directions. A senior in a North River sweatshirt moved first. "Back off," she said firmly. "Find something better to do." A sophomore joined her. "Yeah, this isn't how we treat people here anymore." 2 more students flanked the bullies from behind. "You guys need to leave, now." The upperclassmen looked around, realizing they were outnumbered and isolated. Without the protection of group dynamics or institutional indifference, their cruelty collapsed immediately. They muttered weak excuses and walked away quickly. The freshmen looked up in amazement as the 4 defenders introduced themselves and invited him to join their study group. Naomi grabbed Elijah's arm, her eyes bright with recognition. "Do you see what just happened?" Elijah nodded slowly. The campus culture had shifted because students had witnessed courage in action. They had seen that standing up to bullies was possible, necessary, and effective. Most importantly, they had learned that bystanders held power when they chose to use it. His personal battle had become something larger. His refusal to stay silent had given others permission to speak up. His demonstration of controlled strength had shown students that they could defend themselves and others without becoming the aggressors. 20 minutes later, Elijah stood beside Victor in the university gymnasium, looking at 43 students who had signed up for the first campus self-defense class. They were diverse in every way, different races, ages, backgrounds, and reasons for being there. Some were clearly nervous, having been bullied before. Others seemed determined to learn skills they hoped never to need. A few looked angry, seeking ways to channel their frustration productively. Victor stepped forward, his presence commanding immediate attention despite his calm demeanor. "Before we teach you how to defend yourselves," Victor said, "we need to talk about why you're here. Real strength isn't about winning fights. It's about knowing when to stand tall and never standing alone." Elijah nodded, remembering his grandfather's lessons about power and responsibility. He looked out at the eager faces before him, understanding that this moment represented something far bigger than martial arts instruction. "When you learn to protect yourself," Elijah added, "you also learn to protect others. When you refuse to be a victim, you refuse to let anyone else become one either. That's what changes everything." I hope you enjoyed that story. Please like the video and subscribe so that you do not miss out on the next one. In the meantime, I have handpicked 2 stories for you that I think you will enjoy. Have a great day.